This episode is a continuation of the Possession of Loudun. Make sure you listen to episode 6 before you continue. This is the possession of Jeanne d'Angers.
Welcome to another episode of Hosting Evil. I'm Jess.
And I'm Emily. And Jess, I hope you're ready for this part 2 of the Loudun case. We are going to learn about that crazy nun.
I have been waiting for this literally all week, Emily. I cannot tell you how much I've been waiting for this.
I'm so excited to share this with you.
Please get started.
Okay. Jeanne was born Jeanne de Belchiel to a noble family in 1602 in a part of western France. Her father was the Baron of Cos, so she grew up in a noble family. But when she was very young, it's believed that she had suffered from tuberculosis or one of the diseases that was so common back then. And so this led to her having this stunted growth and a hunch. And as a result, she was considered to have a somewhat unbearable personality. So even as a child, she's someone that people didn't really want to be around. Even her family doesn't really want to deal with her, though. And so when she was little, they did send her away to go stay at a nearby abbey where her aunt was the prioress. But even her aunt didn't really want her, and after a couple of years, she was sent back home.
She was passed around.
Yeah. So eventually, when it's time for her to be of the age when she would be getting married, instead of her parents having to spend the extra money on a dowry for an unattractive daughter, they just sent her to the convent.
Oh my God.
That's where she entered an Ursuline convent, and she took the religious name Jeanne d'Angers, or Joan of the Angels, as we would say in the Americas.
Pretty.
It's very nice. It's very soft, unlike her personality.
Unlike it, yes.
When she gets to the convent, she's tolerated by everyone because they know that she's wealthy, but they also didn't like her, and supposedly she would kind of push off her responsibilities, and she was generally unpleasant.
Was she a popular mean girl because of the money?
No, I think it was more she was kind of the ugly weirdo that you just kind of dealt with.
So the money didn't help her.
I don't think it helped her. Yeah, no. This wasn't
Damn. Usually it does.
No, not in this case. And also it seems during this time in that convent, a lot of the other young women that were nuns there, they probably would have also come from a little bit wealthy family. So she was probably equal to everyone that was around her. But there could have been, some of her superiors, some of the people older than her, maybe they didn't have the money, so they were a little bit kinder to her. But one day, it's almost as if she went through a change, and she became very devout, and she became obedient, which she had not previously been. And she would also start to do extreme things to show her religion and her spirituality, and one of which was faking states of rapture and ecstasy.
Oh.
So she's almost acting signs of possession before she's even initially possessed. Yeah. We also know that she made herself indispensable when the current prioress was retiring. And as a result of that, she was named the replacement. So she's getting power at a very young age.
She was a woman with a plan.
Exactly. And she was doing it by lying. Right. So events at Loudun that involved the mass possession, mass exorcisms, they first began in September of 1632. And that was when Jeanne was first claiming that she was being visited by an apparition of a priest. And then she soon pointed the finger at this Father Grandier. Her hysteria, as some people recognized it, was actually being encouraged by the convent priest and her confessor, Father Mignon. And that's where you get into like the politics of everything.
Because he didn't like that guy.
He didn't like that guy, and he wanted to go after that guy. So he's encouraging her to act possessed, and also the other sisters around her. I'm going to say it now. I think she faked it, but I also think that she opened herself up to something.
And that can happen.
Exactly. So Mignon is encouraging her, and that's when he decides that he's going to perform the first exorcism. So he calls these two Carmelite priests in, and they do the job. There's an exorcism. It happens within the convent. They're working on the trial, whatever. But then Mignon decides that he needs to call in different priests that kind of are going to work for his objective a little bit harder about going after Father Grandier. So Mignon brings in Pierre Rangier and Father Bar, and they're from local areas, but they really believe in this idea of possession. When they come, that's when the exorcisms are moved to the public, and immediately they're a source of entertainment for a lot of people.
I would go.
Yeah, right. I know. And also, I mean, like, they didn't have TV or radio back then.
No.
So
this was like
even
front row seat entertainment.
Yeah, exactly. So during Bar's third exorcism, he sent Jeanne into convulsions, causing her to growl, howl, and grind her teeth and roll around. And then 2 days later...
Let me say, she has it right.
Yeah, right? She does. She definitely knows. She knows what she's doing.
There's no
right?
Google back then. It's not like she could have looked this stuff up. I mean, like,
No.
she had it on. She was on point.
Right. So 2 days later, Bar's exorcism brought about a battle with Asmodeus, who was said to be in Jeanne's belly. And so he's the demon of lust. So everyone that's getting called, all of these demons that are showing up, like, they all took notes. They all knew what kind of party this was going to be. A wild sex party.
Yes, I'm here for it.
It actually took 2 hours during that exorcism when Bar is battling Asmodeus, and Jeanne was pinned down to the bed the entire time, and it didn't end until they gave her an enema of a quart of holy water. A quart of holy water
in the ass.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Is that standard practice?
I guess in 1633 it was.
Note to self, I'm going to look up cases from the 1600s to do.
Well, I'm sure it's going to come up again. Jeanne was supposedly expelled, Asmodeus was supposedly expelled from Jeanne.
So it worked.
But it didn't, because they're still finding that when she attempts to take communion, the demon would force her to fling the host in the face of the priest. She would also curse and claim that she hated God. And they said that her behavior was acting out, and she was looking to do things to displease God. Okay. So then in December 1634, they call on 4 new Jesuit priests to act as exorcists. And they're the whole trial is a spectacle, and everything surrounding Jeanne is just as much
a show.
A shit show.
A shit show.
A holy water shit show. So one priest, Father John Joseph Surrey, he immediately is repelled by Jeanne, and she dislikes him. And whenever he would approach her, she would go into fits. She howled, she would run away, and then she would also do things like mock and laugh at him. So something that we've seen, like
Mhm.
we see this in so many exorcisms when the person that's carrying the demons is going after the priest. So
Absolutely.
that was one of those things where I was like, she might have something going on, you know? The priest thought that the demons were just being energized by her bad behavior. So they're trying to prevent her from being bad, thinking that it's like go-go juice
Oh my god.
for the demons. And so they're continuing to do these exorcisms. And Surrey is convinced that there's this demon Balaam who's present, and Balaam is one of the original fallen angels, and he is said to have 40 legions of demons under his command. So you get the idea that they're like, these demons are powerful
Yeah.
demons.
Especially when you pair it with the sex demon.
Exactly. Exactly. It's almost as if you knew about the next demon I was going to tell you
Swear to God, I
about.
didn't.
So Jean now claimed Isacharon performed an operation on her body one night and persuaded her that she was pregnant, which she then started to believe because she started to experience symptoms of pregnancy. And Isacharon is the demon of the temptation of flesh.
Wait, so she thought she was pregnant by who?
By the demon. So she claimed that he came to her and performed some operation on her body.
So sorry. I'm so sorry. You know, from the last time he
It's
came
so
to her.
yeah.
He came to her.
Oh shit, he came to her.
See, I did
I
it last
missed
time.
it.
You did it
I
this
missed
time.
it.
The innuendos are plentiful.
Especially with this.
So Isacharon came to her.
Yes, and maybe
Literally.
on her.
In her.
And her menstrual cycle stopped.
Wait, was there verification of that?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah, so her menstrual cycle stopped. Her stomach becomes descended, like
Are you kidding?
she vomited frequently, and her breast would secrete milk. Which, does that happen when you're pregnant?
I think it happens with some. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not. I don't know that it's a common,
but it
can
can
yeah.
happen. And also, I mean, like, why would your tits
leak.
Yeah, I don't.
I mean-
I think usually, like, when that happens, like nowadays, it's like,
It's a sign
go
of
get
some
breast
sort of
cancer.
a disease.
Right. So they also said that during the day when this is going on, she was in an extreme state of agitation, and that she only experienced relief when Isacharon would visit her nightly and sexually assault her. And any time that she refused the demon, she would experience a beating
By the demon?
by the demon.
Holy mother of God.
Which, okay, but like also it's questionable because it's like, well, you're agitated.
How
Ow.
else? So she's saying that this unseen thing would rape her?
Yeah. I mean, Anna Nicole Smith had sex with a ghost, so.
Did she really? I love her. I didn't know that about
Oh my God,
her.
you didn't know that about her?
She had sex with a ghost?
Yes. So there was a physician that pronounced her pregnancy to be genuine. Now, I did like put an asterisk by this in my notes because I mean, like back
They didn't have
then,
pregnancy tests.
yeah, like what did you have to,
Ultrasounds.
like pee on a rabbit and if it
If it
dies,
hopped twice, you were pregnant.
right? So they're convinced that she's pregnant. She's convinced that she's pregnant, and supposedly, you know, like she was even trying to find a way to abort
The demon baby.
This demon, yeah. But then during an exorcism, Isacharon showed up and said that her pregnancy was all a deception by the demons. And with that, Jeanne started to throw up a large quantity of blood, and her pregnancy symptoms vanished.
What?
Right? So when I'm doing the research, I'm like, okay, she's faking it. This is like overplayed, whatever. And then I'm like, okay, well, that's a little
Extra.
extreme. Yeah.
Well, when the demon shows up, like, is he visible to, like...
No, it's from what I understand, it's no different than any other
So he's speaking through
exorcism.
her.
He's speaking through her.
Gotcha.
Yeah. There was a point when all the other nuns were experiencing the possession, and the exorcist would come and they would talk to them, and they would claim areas of the body that the different demons were present in. So Jean was in all of that.
Gotcha.
But that's the thing where like all of this gets so crazy, because so much of that was just focused on nailing that priest for the witch hunt. So, like some of what happened to her is so questionable.
Yeah.
But with that happening, with this, demonic pregnancy ending, Seurat, the priest, and Jean both become convinced that it's actually a miracle that she's no longer pregnant. And this actually changes Seurat's actions. And so now he kind of changes his way of attack, and he starts to become more of like a spiritual instructor to Jean than than solely her exorcist. And she would continue to resist his help. And then one day she made a change because she decided that she wanted to become a saint.
I was just gonna say that. I'm like, they're gonna try to make her venerable?
Yep.
I was thinking as soon as you said miracle, I'm like, I know where this is going.
Yep.
They're gonna try and make a saint out of this crazy bee.
So she became inspired by the life of Saint Teresa of Avila.
Of course.
And Saint Teresa had lived during the 16th century. And what's interesting is she was only declared a saint in 1622. So very recent to then, within like 10 to 15 years. So, this is
still hot
Catholic
on our mind.
pop culture,
I
and
want to get me some of that.
And Saint Teresa is a very, very significant saint in terms of like the Catholic Church. She was a mystic. She's one of the very few, if not only, doctor of the church. She also experienced ecstasy. And with this, she changes her life as a religious. She increased her prayer time. She took on strict behaviors that were common during that time, and one of which is the act of mortification. The term mortification literally means putting your sin to death, and it varies from denying oneself pleasurable things like food or drink, but the more extreme end is inflicting pain on oneself. It would be given as like a penance.
Annalise had that.
Yes, exactly.
She was oftentimes hurting herself.
Yes. The way that Jean actually did that was she would sleep on a bed of boards, like took away her hay bed probably, and would sleep on boards. She wore a belt that was spiked with nails, and she also wore a hair shirt, and I had to look this up.
A hair shirt?
A hair shirt, an undershirt that was made from like horsehair or some animal's hair. The intention was that you were perpetually uncomfortable.
Oh my God,
just
thinking about it makes me uncomfortable.
Being itched and scratched.
Yes. Oh my God.
And she would beat herself for hours every day.
Well, and this is a part of becoming a saint.
Yes.
Not anymore. Eyes. Wait, in reality or in her eyes?
In her eyes. I mean, a part of becoming a saint, you have to go through the person doesn't actually do it, like, it happens after they die, but, like, you have to have
Happen,
miracles.
yeah.
Yeah, and also, I mean, most especially during this time, I mean, most of the people that were becoming saints lived, like, wretched,
Yeah, they weren't getting
terrible
luxuries,
lives.
but they
No.
weren't also hurting themselves violently.
No, no.
Okay.
I mean, she's a little bit
Extreme.
extreme. Now, but I will also say, like, it is important to remember that during this time, these things that we're talking about that were seen as extreme were not considered that. Like, it's almost life was just perpetual
Yes, because 'cause we're
suffering.
very spoiled now. So I guess
Yes.
looking at it back then, through our eyes,
It
it
seems
seems god awful.
extreme,
Okay.
but back then, like, it was actually approved of. And in fact, her priest, Father Surrey, he especially approved of it. And um when he would even, like, prescribe mortification to her as, like, a penance during reconciliation, there were times when she would refuse, so he would tell the demons to whip themselves, and they would, then making Jean scream as if she was being beat.
So she was still actively possessed at this
Yes,
time,
she's still actively
parenthesis quotes.
possessed, trying to live a better life, but she's still experiencing a demonic
Gotcha.
presence. She's becoming more receptive. So it's almost like there is something in her changing that's allowing her to sit with Father Sure because he was among the first that she hated. So, like, the fact that she's now kind of letting him
There's some
in,
growth here.
there is some growth, yes. They began to meet privately and so that he could teach her, like, some of the mystical theology of Saint Teresa, for example, or, like, some of the other saints that were very contemporary to them. And they would also pray together. But this actually created problems for him because his superiors felt like, well, we sent you to be an exorcist and now you're having, like, private meetings with this possessed person. You don't really need to be there anymore.
Mm.
So they were going to send him back to Bordeaux, which is where he had previously been. So in October of 1635, they were ordering that he be replaced. Immediately after that, Jean fell ill for several days and asked to be exorcised. On November 5th, a large group gathers and they see Father Surrey expel Leviathan from her. And so, because of that, he was actually allowed to set.
So who's Leviathan?
So, Leviathan is actually from Hebrew lore, and he's a primordial monster of the seas and king of the
So
beasts.
he's a demon.
Yes, yes. And he's one of, like, in a sense, one of the original demons, if you consider that he's all the way back from, like, Hebrew folklore.
So she had multiple big shots in her.
Yes. Big,
Big,
big.
big, big.
Keep that word on the tip
I
of your
will.
tongue.
Are we gonna get bigger?
We're gonna get huge. So, not long after Leviathan is expelled, then one day a bloody cross appeared on her forehead and it remained there for 3 weeks. Perpetually fresh, maybe bleeding a little.
And
Now,
she had no wounds on her.
no, like, no signs of the stigmata, but
Or no signs that she pricked her finger and
well,
drew.
that's the question, though. I mean, like, she could have done this herself. Who knows? Anyway, but disappeared. So that's when we then get Balaam has announced that he's ready to go. So we knew that he was there, but he had been kind of silent And I'm sure that, he probably had the other demons to compete against for attention and center stage. So he's now ready to go, and he said that he would leave his name. Jean prayed that he would not inscribe his name on her because she was afraid that then she would have the mark of a demon. And she prayed that the name of Saint Joseph would appear on her instead. And when he left November 29th, she was left with the name Joseph inscribed on her hand.
By, like, a scar?
Like, it just appeared. And what's actually even crazier is that later the names Jesus, Mary, and Saint Francis de Sales would also appear on her arm. And one of the most common images that you see if you look up Jeanne d'Angers is it looks as if there's writing on her hand.
Wait, what, there's pictures of this girl?
Not pictures, they're like
Drawings.
inscriptions. Yeah, drawings, like wood carvings that they did back
Wow.
then. But I mean, that's the thing, like, it was a big deal. And so what's really bizarre is the names would fade, but then they would also return. And she claimed to have some guardian angel that was, like, allowing them to return at this point. So we kind of see where, like, she slips into, like, almost a level of fanaticism with her religious beliefs. But at the same time, she's somewhat being celebrated because Father Seurat is seeing this as an extraordinary grace that she would have the name Joseph on her and not that demon. And other people are seeing her as a saint. But so this is after the death of Father Grandier, and things are still happening to her. Some people are saying that she's a charlatan, though, that she's faking all of this. Or also the idea they talked about the fact that she could be like under the influence of others around her. So we know, though, that she still has Isaacaron present.
Is that baby daddy?
That was the baby daddy. That's correct. I guess the
Demon baby daddy?
the demon baby daddy that didn't come to fruition. He leaves Jean on January 7th, 1636. So Father Suri, who's still present, he's continuing his exorcisms, and he has not a new demon, but kind of like the biggest one that they're going after at this point, and that's Behemoth.
Mm-hmm.
So Behemoth is one of the biblical names used for the devil, and he's seen as an impure animal and an unclean spirit. By October of that year, Father Suri has to give up on the exorcisms. He's not being successful
Yeah,
enough.
it's taken forever.
He's called back to Bordeaux. So even though, like, in a way, I kind of feel bad because I kind of feel like he was helping her. But he wasn't.
Well, they had it seemed like they were developing a relationship too, and it was thriving, or at least helping her not be as crazy as she was in the beginning.
Yeah. But whatever. He is now gone.
Shit happens.
Exactly. He's replaced. And now we have Father Risset. Father Risset was unrelenting with his exorcisms, even when Jean was resisting them. And he actually made her condition deteriorate, and she would fall ill and vomit blood. So he was performing an extreme amount of exorcisms. Jean had a vision in which God told her that she would be taken to the point of death, but that she would not die.
She'd get close.
She would get close, but that she would not die. So then there was a day when they're performing the exorcisms, and there was a doctor attending who felt that she only had hours left to live. And that's when Jean had a vision of her good angel, angel that she now connected to. And they came to her in the form of a beautiful youth. then followed by Saint Joseph, who anointed her with oil that caused her to miraculously recover. And just like that, she woke from the exorcism. She was no longer looking like she was about to die, and she revealed an oil stain of 5 drops on her undershirt.
So she has some things to corroborate what she's saying now.
Yes, exactly. At least that's what she's claiming. There's people that said it's totally a
It's
fake.
still all
Yeah,
BS.
yeah. So finally, Rosé feels that he is able to reach Behemoth, and Behemoth, during one of the exorcisms, agreed that he would leave Jean if she made a pilgrimage to the tomb of Saint Francis de Sales in Annecy, and that she must be accompanied by her old priest, Father Suri. So they decide, we're going to let this happen. They call him into Loudun, and they travel. They went on a 5-month march through France. They traveled to major cities where tens of thousands of people turned out to see Jeanne and also to see her relics. One of which meaning the oil on the undershirt, she had that. They would also come to see the names on her hand and arm. And supposedly at Annecy, a possessed girl was reportedly cured from touching the stained shirt. So there's a lot happening, right?
My eyes are wide.
There's been
I'm
so
trying to wrap
much.
my brain around all of this.
This is why I couldn't work her into she couldn't match someone else's episode. She had to get her own stage, right?
So she's still reaping benefits all these
She
years later.
is. So then they return, and on October 15th, Behemoth left Jean, and Surrey returned to his point in Bordeaux, which I have to point out that October 15th is actually the feast day of Saint Teresa of
Yes, we
Avila.
celebrate that all the time.
I know, which I was like, okay, is this coincidental, or was she like, oh, good,
I'm gonna jump on that.
I'm going to use her name, I'm going to use her date, and he's gone. Behemoth is out of here. So Behemoth is gone, and she has returned to the convent, and actually she would never leave again after that pilgrimage out. She'll die. She died
She
in the
died.
convent. No, she lived on.
Forever.
So at this point, this is around like 1638. Jeanne actually dies in 1655. The demons would occasionally reappear a few times, and they would beat and harass her. But at this point, she was so focused on producing heavenly miracles that like she didn't even have time
She didn't care.
to worry about being possessed, you know? She began writing her autobiography in
Of
1644.
course she did.
Right?
Of course she did.
Which also, like, Saint Teresa of Avila was a big writer. I think that she found a cheat sheet and she was like, this is the road to sainthood.
She was going balls to the wall with this.
Yeah. Which, by the way, she did not become a saint. So honestly, I wish I could read French just to read her autobiography, which is in French. You can get translations, but it's always best to read it in the original
course.
form. Her accounts are considered to be self-absorbed and lack any reference to the consequences of her actions, and she made very little reference to what she did to Grandier, even though at the height of that drama and his trial, she had admitted that she was guilty of framing him. In her autobiography, she wrote that once her possession started, she plunged into fits of madness and rage, and she felt a continual disturbance of mind that had lasted for months. So in some ways, like, what she says she experiences does make sense.
I'm going to say this is one of the probably earliest cases of narcissism we may have ever seen.
Yeah, basically. So because she never fully admitted if her possession was a show, and she actually claimed that the public performances that she put on were just the result of her weakness of mind and spirit, and that she opened herself up and made herself susceptible to suggestion. So basically, like, she's still blaming other
It's
people.
like when O.J. Simpson wrote that book. If I was going to murder, this is how I would have done it.
If
This
I
is
was
what she's
going to be
doing.
possessed, this is how I would have done it. So,
Man.
she considered her life to be a spiritual quest, and one in which she had allowed demons to act against her as a consequence of her own defective will. And she actually even admitted that twice during these dark times of possession, she had attempted suicide, which, I mean, in a way is a big deal, especially back then. I mean, that's, like, you weren't going to be buried if you had committed suicide. She tried to get back in touch with Father Suri for some time, and he actually didn't like respond to her letters,
Really?
but he eventually did. And they stayed in contact until his death the same year as her
I
own.
think he was like an innocent guy who just got caught up in the wrong.
I mean, maybe he had the hots for her crazy ass too, a little bit,
Listen, sometimes that level of crazy can overshadow some hunches and some other
right?
stuff if that's what you're into.
So, in her later life, she was still met with both support and criticism. Some saw her as saintly, but others criticized her, called her a liar. She was also called a witch and a magician even after her death. Um, Jeanne died in January of 1665. And so, this is like one of my favorite things about Catholicism and sainthood. Her head was cut off and placed in a silver and gold reliquary. The stained shirt that she had was already in its own reliquary, and these items became items of like popular devotion. People would come and visit them. And there was also reportedly a painting done of her showing the expulsion of Behemoth, and there were several other significant pieces of imagery present as well. But in the end, some years later, they just kind of wiped all of that out. And her relics have since disappeared. No one knows where her head is. No one knows where the painting is. That's it, the end.
Friend. Oh my God.
Yup.
Wait, so on a scale of like 0 to this bitch is crazy, where do you think she fell?
This bitch is crazy. Even
Because
I
you had some moments, Emily, where you were like,
listen,
I believe her.
I low key, okay, I low key believe that she was crazy, but I also think that it's kind of like one of those things where it's like you attract what you open yourself up to. So I do really believe that to some extent she was possessed in some way. And especially because it seems like in the beginning she was lying and making stuff up, but then when she sort of started to like steer into it, she was putting herself out there for something to come to her.
Yeah, it was like she was just welcoming it.
Or like the Ouija board. Like you play with an Ouija board and you open the portal
Yeah.
to hell,
Yeah, I could definitely.
So
It pisses me off if she was allowed to have miracles happen as a result of her being a brat.
yeah.
That is the part where I'm like, really?
Well,
That's who we're gonna reward with that type of level of miracle?
and in some ways, like, you can at least find solace in the fact that she's not a saint.
And her head was cut off.
And her head was cut off. And unfortunately for her, like, the only way that she's still remembered to this day is in this, like, crazy world
way.
of, like, occult stories and, like,
But
historic
I think
witch
that's
trials.
exactly what she wanted.
Oh, it's where she deserves to be, whether she wanted it or not.
Thanks so much for joining us on this episode of Hosting Evil. For more information on this case and others, you can visit our website at hostingevilpodcast.com.
And don't forget to check us out on social media at Hosting Evil Podcast.
Until next time, I'm Jess. Peace, love, and light.
And I'm Emily. Keep fighting those demons.
Hosting Evil is recorded and produced by Carly Strange at Rockdale Studios.